Hello, this is Kaniso. Welcome back to the Forgotten Chains. In our previous episode, Kingdoms Under Siege, we explored how the expanding slave trade transformed the political landscape of sub-Saharan Africa. We saw how powerful kingdoms found themselves facing impossible choices. Some resisted the growing demand for captives, defending their people against outside threats. Others entered alliances with slave traders, exchanging human lives for wealth,
weapons, and political influence. As these pressures mounted, old rivalries intensified. Neighbor turned against neighbor, and wars that might once have been fought over land or power
increasingly became opportunities to capture people for sale. The trade in human beings reshaped governments, economies, and entire societies, leaving a legacy that would endure for generations. But one question remains.
How did millions of men, women, and children become captives in the first place?
Every enslaved person had a beginning to their story. Every chain began with a capture. Every caravan began with a raid. Tonight, we move from the halls of kings and the decisions of rulers
to the terrifying reality faced by ordinary villagers.
We step into the darkness before dawn, when peaceful communities awoke to the sounds of hoofbeats,
shouting, and flames. We will examine the organized raiding parties that hunted human beings,
the tactics they employed, and the fear they spread across vast regions of Africa. This is the first link in the chain of slavery, the moment lives were forever changed.
Next, episode 4, the Brokers of Bondage. Let us watch.
Welcome back to another episode of The Forgotten Chains. This is episode 4, the Brokers of Bondage. Before there were slave markets, before there were caravans stretching across the Sahara, before thousands disappeared into history, there were the raiders. They arrived without warning, sometimes before dawn, sometimes under the cover of darkness, sometimes pretending to be friends. They came on horseback. They came in canoes. They came with muskets, spears, bows, and chains. Their mission was simple: capture human beings. Every slave sold in the great markets of North Africa, the Middle East, and beyond began the journey here, at the point of capture. Behind every enslaved person was a village destroyed, a family broken, and a community forever changed. This is the story of the men everyone feared. Chapter 1, the Raiders. Every slave raid began with violence, but the slave trade could never survive on violence alone. It required a marketplace. It required buyers. It required middlemen. It required people willing to turn human beings into merchandise. Behind every caravan crossing the Sahara, behind every dhow sailing across the Indian Ocean, behind every child torn from a mother's arms, stood a network of brokers whose wealth depended upon human suffering. These were the brokers of bondage, the wealthy buyers far from the villages where the captives were seized. Wealthy men waited. In the great cities of North Africa, across the Arabian Peninsula, in the prosperous ports bordering the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, powerful merchants, noble households, military commanders, and influential elites created an enormous demand for enslaved labor. Some captives became domestic servants. Others worked on plantations. Many labored in mines, pearl fisheries, construction projects, or military service. Young boys were often selected for military training or forced labor. Women and girls were frequently exploited as domestic servants or concubines. Children were prized because they could be raised into lifelong servitude. For generations, this demand fueled an international commercial system stretching thousands of miles. The buyers rarely witnessed the terror of the raids, yet their wealth encouraged them to continue. As long as buyers existed, raiders would keep coming. The professional slave traders connecting the raiders to the buyers were professional slave traders. Some owned vast camel caravans capable of transporting hundreds of captives across deserts where few could survive. Others controlled fleets of sailing vessels navigating the Red Sea and Indian Ocean. These traders were businessmen. They negotiated prices, calculated risks, purchased supplies, paid guards, bribed officials when necessary, established trade agreements. To them, every captive represented profit. Strong young men brought one price, young women another, children yet another. The language of humanity disappeared beneath the language of commerce. Families became inventory. Children became investments. Human lives became commodities. Entire fortunes were built upon this cruel arithmetic. The local conspirators, but perhaps the most painful truth lies much closer to home. Many slave raiders could never have succeeded without local collaborators. Some chiefs accepted gifts, weapons, horses, or luxury goods in exchange for captives. Others used foreign traders to eliminate political rivals. Corrupt officials pointed raiders toward vulnerable villages. Interpreters served as negotiators. Guides led caravans through hidden mountain passes. Some merchants purchased captives locally before selling them farther north or east. Not every African leader participated. Many resisted fiercely. Some kingdoms fought repeated wars against slave raiders. Others built fortified settlements to protect their people. Many ordinary villagers risked their own lives to hide refugees or help families escape. Yet wherever greed overcame conscience, the trade flourished. History demands that we acknowledge both the heroes who resisted and the collaborators who profited. Ignoring either distorts the truth. A market built on human misery, the slave trade was more than a series of isolated raids. It was an economic machine. Raiders captured, middlemen transported, merchants financed, buyers purchased, officials looked away. Local collaborators supplied information. Every participant strengthened the chain. Every transaction encouraged another raid. Every sale ensured another village would one day awaken to screams. The market rewarded cruelty because cruelty produced profit. The human cost, the brokers counted wealth. The victims counted losses, lost fathers, lost mothers, lost children, lost languages, lost traditions, lost futures. For every ledger recording a profitable transaction, there existed another family whose history ended in silence. No amount of gold could measure what was taken. No marketplace could calculate the value of a stolen life. Closing transition, the raiders believed they had conquered their victims. The merchants believed they had purchased their future. The brokers believed history would remember only their wealth. But history remembers something far greater. It remembers the resilience of those who survived. It remembers communities that rebuilt. It remembers faith that endured. And in our next chapter, we follow the captives themselves across scorching deserts, through deadly caravan routes, and into one of history's longest and most grueling forced marches, where countless lives were lost long before they ever reached a slave market. Chapter 2: A Business Built on Fear. The slave trade was not random violence. It became an organized business. Professional raiding groups formed across many parts of sub-Saharan Africa. Some worked for wealthy merchants. Others served local rulers. Some operated independently, selling captives to whoever paid the highest price. Human beings became valuable merchandise. A healthy young man meant profit. A young woman meant profit. Even children represented future income. As demand increased, raids became more frequent. Villages once separated by weeks of peaceful existence began living under constant fear. Every barking dog, every distant drum, every unfamiliar traveler could signal danger. Communities began sleeping in shifts. Lookouts climbed nearby hills. Villages built fences from thorn bushes. Some dug trenches around their homes, but determined raiders adapted. No defense remained effective forever. The economy of slavery demanded more victims. Chapter 3: How the raiders attacked. Raiders rarely attacked by accident. They gathered intelligence first. Local informants often revealed which villages had the weakest defenses. Some traders disguised themselves as merchants. Others entered villages claiming friendship. They learned where warriors lived, where children played, where livestock were kept. Then they returned with armed men. The attack usually came before sunrise, when people were asleep, when fires had nearly burned out, when visibility was poor. Confusion became the raiders' greatest weapon. Houses were set on fire. People ran in every direction. Warriors struggled to organize. Parents searched desperately for children. and yon who resisted risked immediate death. The goal was speed. The longer a raid lasted, the greater the chance neighboring villages would respond. Within minutes, hundreds of lives could be destroyed forever. Entire villages sometimes disappeared before the sun fully rose. Chapter 4. The Hunt for People. Those who escaped the first assault often faced another danger. The chase experienced raiders knew frightened people followed predictable paths. Some fled toward rivers, others toward forests. Others tried returning to rescue loved ones. Raiders anticipated every move. Horsemen outran those fleeing across open land. Dogs tracked hidden families. Boats intercepted those attempting escape by river. Even dense forests offered only temporary safety. Captured prisoners were immediately tied together. Wooden forks around the neck prevented escape. Ropes bound wrists. Heavy logs were sometimes attached to ankles. Those unable to continue walking could be abandoned or killed. The raiders had little interest in mercy. Profit demanded efficiency. Chapter 5. Betrayal from Within. Not every raid came from outsiders. Some involved neighboring communities. Political rivals sometimes sold prisoners captured during local conflicts. Debt could lead families into slavery. Criminals could be sold, or captives became merchandise. Over time, the distinction between warfare and slave raiding often disappeared. The growing demand for captives encouraged violence that might never have occurred otherwise. Old rivalries intensified. New conflicts emerged. Trust between neighboring communities collapsed. Some leaders resisted participation. Others embraced it. The rewards could be enormous. Imported weapons, fine cloth, luxury goods, salt, horses, prestige. For some rulers, selling captives became one of their greatest sources of wealth. The tragedy became self-perpetuating. Weapons purchased through slave trading enabled even larger raids. Larger raids produced more captives. More captives produced more wealth. The cycle continued for generations. Chapter 6. Living in constant fear. Perhaps the greatest weapon of the raiders was not violence. It was fear. People changed how they lived. Villages relocated to mountaintops. Communities hid deep within forests. Farms were abandoned because they lay too far from safety. Trade routes disappeared. Children learned never to wander alone. Nighttime celebrations became rare. Wedding feasts were shortened. Markets closed before sunset. The psychological wounds lasted long after each raid ended. Parents whispered warnings to children. Stay close. Don't trust strangers. Run if you hear gunfire. Entire generations grew up expecting violence. Some historians estimate that millions lived under the constant possibility of capture over many centuries. Not everyone became enslaved, but nearly everyone knew someone who had vanished. A brother, a daughter, a husband, a mother, a friend. The absence became a permanent part of community memory. Chapter 7. The beginning of the long journey. The raid was only the beginning. Those captured had survived the attack, but their greatest suffering still lay ahead. Ahead waited long forced marches across Africa. Disease, starvation, brutality. The scorching Sahara, the crowded slave markets. Lives measured by price rather than humanity. Every chain began with a raid. Every caravan began with a capture. Every market began with someone being torn from home. The raiders did more than seize people. They reshaped societies. They spread fear across generations. They changed the history of an entire continent. Yet despite unimaginable suffering, many African communities endured, cultures survived, languages survived, faiths survived, families rebuilt. History remembers the violence, but it must also remember the resilience. Because even in humanity's darkest chapters, hope refused to disappear.
The raid is over. The fires begin to fade, and silence returns to the village. Those who have been captured, their nightmare has only begun. Bound together with ropes and wooden yokes, they take one last look at the home they may never see again. Behind them lie shattered families, grieving parents, and children whose cries slowly disappear into the distance.
Ahead lies an unknown journey. They do not know where they are being taken.
They do not know how far they must walk. They do not know if they will ever see another sunrise. Day after day, the captives are driven across rivers, through dense forests,
Over rugged mountains and into the scorching heat of the African interior. Food is scarce.
Water is precious. Those who stumble are beaten.
Those who can no longer continue risk being abandoned or left to die.
With every mile, hope begins to fade. Yet even in the midst of unimaginable suffering,
Some refuse to surrender.
Quiet acts of courage emerge. Strangers become family. Faith is whispered in the darkness.
The human spirit struggles to survive against overwhelming odds.
how many survived these forced marches? How many perished before ever reaching a slave market?
And what did it take to endure a journey designed to strip away every trace of freedom
And dignity.
Join us next week on Kyoshi Chronicles for episode 5, The Long Walk,
where we follow the heartbreaking path from capture to captivity.
uncover one of the most brutal chapters in the history of the African slave trade. Because for the captives, the raid was only the beginning.
Please join me in growing this channel. Subscribe, like, comment, share.
and don't forget to hit the bell.